Slavery is not a side note in the Bible. It is law, it is prophecy, and it is gospel. The God of the Hebrews doesn't just permit slavery, it commands it, it enforces it, and it even turns his own chosen people into slaves over and over again. It's only via our modern moral sensibilities that slavery is no longer an openly practiced institution. Of course, it would be naive of me to claim there isn't modern-day slavery, but outside of the modern American prison system, it's not generally sanctioned by the state. But when it comes to God and the Bible, that's a whole different story. Section 1. The Law of Slavery. Let's start with the statutes. The Old Testament is explicit. Leviticus 25:44-46 gives Israel the right to buy foreigners and their children as permanent property to be passed down as inheritance. That is generational chattel slavery. Exodus 21:2-6 allows Hebrew men to be sold into slavery for 6 years unless they choose to remain a slave for life after a ritual ear piercing. A Hebrew woman sold as a slave does not get automatic release. Exodus 21:7-11. I want to mention the reason a male slave might choose to remain a slave is because any wife or offspring he acquires while a slave stays the master's property. Essentially, they hold his family hostage. Exodus 21:20-21 makes it legal for a master to beat his slave. If the slave dies instantly, there is punishment. If the slave lingers for a day or two, though, before dying, no punishment because the slave is his money. Deuteronomy 20:10-14 orders Israel to take women and children of conquered cities as plunder. Deuteronomy 21:10-14 lays out rules for when you capture a woman and decide to make her your wife. This is not metaphor. This is legislation. The law books of the Bible build slavery into the fabric of their society. Section 2. God enslaves his own people. The Hebrew God does not stop at letting his own people enslave others. Time and time again, he personally sells, delivers, and gives Israel into slavery. He predicts it from the beginning, telling Abram in Genesis 15:13-14 that his descendants will be enslaved for 400 years. Why would that be? They're his people. Can't he stop them from being enslaved? Apparently not. Exodus 1 delivers exactly on that in Egypt. In the book of Judges, it becomes a cycle. Israel sins and God sells them into bondage. In Judges 3:8, because Israel did evil, God's anger burns and it sells them into the hands of the king of Aram. The people serve him for 8 years until they cry out and God raises Othniel, a Messiah, as a deliverer. Judges 3:12-14. Israel falls again and God strengthens Elgon, king of Moab, who allies with the Ammonites and the Amalekites. They defeat Israel, capture Jericho, and Israel serves Elgon for 18 years until Ehud assassinates him. Judges 4:2-3. Israel is delivered into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, whose general Sisera commands 900 iron chariots. For 20 years they are oppressed with cruelty until Deborah and Barak lead a revolt that kills Sisera. Judges 6:1. For 7 years, God gives Israel into Midian's power. The Midianites raid the land like swarms of locusts, destroying crops and livestock, forcing Israelites to hide in caves. Gideon is called to lead their rescue. Judges 10:7-8. God sells Israel into the hands of both the Philistines in the west and the Ammonites in the east. For 18 years, they crush Israel, especially the tribes east of the Jordan, until Jephthah, who sacrifices his daughter via fire, eventually rises as a judge, or a Messiah, if you will. Judges 13:1. Once more, Israel does evil, and God delivers them into Philistine control for 40 years. This is the longest oppression in Judges, setting the stage for Samson's story of resistance and eventual downfall. Each time, the text is clear. God handed them over. God sold them. God delivered them into slavery. During the monarchy, it continues. God allowed Philistine dominations under Saul, Aramean oppression under Hazael, Assyrian deportations in 2 Kings 15 and 17, and finally, Babylonian exile in 2 Kings 24-25. The prophets double down. Jeremiah 25:11 declares 70 years of slavery in Babylon. Jeremiah 27:6-7 calls Nebuchadnezzar's God servant, empowered to rule over Judah. Lamentations 1:3-5 describes Judah groaning under the harsh servitude. The message is unmistakable. Slavery is not a tragedy in this worldview. It is a weapon God uses against his own followers again and again. Section 3, the gospel of obedience. When we move into the New Testament, the chains tighten. Ephesians 6, 5-8 tells slaves to obey their earthly masters with fear and trembling, as if they were serving Christ. Colossians 3, 22-25 repeats it. Slaves must obey in everything. Titus 2, 9-10 commands slaves to be submissive and not talk back. 1 Peter 2:18 goes further, telling slaves to submit not only to good masters, but to cruel ones as well. Paul's letter to Philemon returns the runaway slave Onesimus to his master. He does not command release. He does ask for kindness, though. Points for that. And in 1 Corinthians 7, 20-24, Paul tells believers to remain in the condition they were called, whether free or slave. No abolition, no liberation, no gospel of freedom, just obedience framed as godliness. From the laws of Moses to the punishments of judges and kings to the decrees of the prophets to the letters of Paul, slavery runs like a red line through the Bible. God sanctions it, God enforces it, God uses it as a punishment on his own people. And the New Testament instructs slaves to accept it as holy order. The Bible, God is not a liberator. He's a slave master. They say shepherd and sheep, but it's really master and slave. He binds, he sells, he commands obedience, and he calls it righteousness. This is not morality. This is oppression dressed as divinity. And if God is willing to enslave his own chosen people, what hope do the rest of us have? Check out my Evil God Monster of Abraham series by clicking over here. And if you're into the Atheist Top 10s thing, click over here. Sin safely, my friends. Take care.